us that learning and inspiration can take place anywhere, that education at its root is about empathy, that we are empowered by our ability to reason, that we need to celebrate our minds and marvel at what the mind can do by investigating, listening, questioning, studying, and discussing all things while being attuned to others' voices and narratives. You both are indeed inspiring teachers. Thank you also to all alumni participants in this weekend. Could you all please stand as we recognize and thank you for traveling from all over the country and the world to share your work and wisdom with all of us. Already last night, I heard about connections being made between alums and current students. Perhaps my favorite story was that the two dairy farmers in this community somehow sat next to each other at dinner. Just a quick note for all alumni participants in the weekend, we're going to have a group photo after our panel and our Q&A. So if we could all just come up to the front of this room right after this session, that would be great. As we continue our celebration of alumni and education, I'm honored to share with you, all of you, these amazing panelists who are working in many different areas of education. I'm going to let them tell their own stories of how they have chosen their particular paths in education, what their journeys have been, and perhaps how St. Andrews informed those journeys, what challenges they faced, and rewards they've received along the way. After they tell their stories, we will open it up to questions. I hope that this can be a conversation about education among these women and with all of you. Jen is going to start us off.
Great. So good morning. I'm really happy to be back here on campus. This building was made actually the summer between my sophomore and junior year, so I've had many memories on this stage, specifically during Arts Weekend. So it feels really great to be back here today. I'm extremely thankful for my opportunities that St. Andrews has allowed for me over my, since graduating here. I'm the youngest of 3 siblings that graduated from St. Andrews as class of '06. As a first generation Colombian American, a lot of resources were very slim to none when we were growing up, and so I felt that coming here to St. Andrews allowed for us to just have more doors open and available for us leaving here. So I graduated from here in '06 and moved and got accepted to Johns Hopkins for early decision. At Johns Hopkins, I majored in psychology, Spanish, and Latin American studies. My junior year, I interned at a mental health institution and was interested in more the clinical aspect of talking to patients, but felt that the clinical or the mental health realm wasn't really my calling. I found that the adolescent unit, the referrals that were taking place was more done through the school counselors, through the educators in their schools that they were participating. And so it piqued my interest in becoming an educator. That senior year, I applied for Teach for America, but unfortunately did not get accepted. And so I found that to be a huge challenge that year. Luckily, I have a very supportive mom. She started looking into other programs with me as well, and we learned about the bilingual school counseling program at NYU. So I applied and got accepted and embarked my journey in education at NYU that following fall in New York City. My brother, who graduated here as well, class of '04, he also was living in New York City, so we have a very strong connection together, and I think a large part is based off of graduating from the same school. So we ended up becoming roommates in New York City for the 4 years while in New York, and I became a bilingual school counselor at a Title I public middle school, September 2012. The public school that I started working as a bilingual school counselor had a 20% temporary housing population, 35% special ed population. So right there, a large challenge was just providing those resources for my students and being able to be a true advocate for them as a school counselor. The same token, the biggest reward has been being a part of that new school. I was there from the beginning as the founding staff when it was just myself as a school counsel, the principal, and 7 other teachers. We opened the door that fall to 120 sixth graders and have now since evolved into a school where it's 6th through 8th. We have about 260 scholars, and it's in our 6th year of existence. And so as a school counselor, have had the opportunity of just being able to provide those resources for our kids.
And currently I am the Director of Academic Programs at a program known as Prep for Prep, which is a leadership development program that places or helps to place students into incredible environments like St. Andrew's School. And at one point I will speak to you about the role that St. Andrew's played in getting that position. And it was a very long time ago. But I really credit St. Andrews for allowing me to reach my dreams of being able to help other people in education. I've had a very varied background in education, starting off in an early education program, a Head Start program in Brooklyn, New York, then going to a very high achieving public school that was a successful public school, where there were individuals at that particular school who attended St. Andrews, which is how I heard about St. Andrews initially, then of course experiencing everything that St. Andrews had to offer, so a small boarding school environment, then going off to a women's college. So if you think about that spectrum, everything from being in the city to the cornfields at the time, to being in a women's college in Massachusetts, it really allowed me to shape my ideas, my ideals, the things that I wanted other students to have similar opportunities to that. I credit St. Andrews for my current position simply because I started working at Prep for Prep as a result of attending St. Andrews. Prep for Prep launched its Prep 9 program when I was a sophomore here at St. Andrews, so it was my first year, and I remember them coming to campus with, at the time, their entire contingent of individuals, and they stayed in our rooms, and I said, what is this program? And the next year, the individuals who came, they were so confident, ready to tackle everything. They were high achieving, they had people supporting them, and I said, that's part of what I want to be a part of. So I applied for a summer job. Ultimately, that was 1989, and yes, that was a very long time ago. As someone who taught history after I graduated from college, I guess you can call me a 20th century artifact. But I am here to say we're still around. So from that high school job as an advisor in Prep 9, I continued to work there, ultimately became a teaching assistant. Then I became a teacher after graduating college and continued to move up the ranks in Prep for Prep while pursuing a career in education at independent day schools in New York. During that time, I was really able to try, it's funny, the first school that, actually the second school where I taught was a school called Poly Prep. And I think the thing that actually drew me to that school is it reminded me of St. Andrews. There was an oval when you came in, the admissions office was in the same place, and I wanted to make that Brooklyn school everything that it could be, kind of like the cornfields of St. Andrews. So I tried to dive into everything. I was involved in a lot of things here at St. Andrews, and I did those same things at Poly Prep, everything from theater to sports, ultimately coaching volleyball, and I learned volleyball here at St. Andrews, but literally saying, I think I can do that because I played at St. Andrews, and clearly St. Andrews that's going to get me pretty far. And I guess it did, because I was able to coach 3 state championship volleyball teams, having no background until 5th grade. So that was pretty exciting. And I credit St. Andrews for that, because it gave me the confidence in believing, sure, you can do it. We were a small school, so you try it out, you're on the team, you're a star. I continued to be grateful to St. Andrews, and coming back, I had the privilege of returning 2 days ago with 20 families from Prep for Prep to tour St. Andrews, and to just be reminded of how special this place is and how unique it is. We work with 12 different boarding schools, but there's something uniquely special about St. Andrews, and I think just being here and being a part of this panel and interacting with the students, it just reminds me of that, so I'm very happy to be here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tammy Small. I am class of 1993. This building, or at least this room, did not exist when I was here. To give you an idea, the pool, our senior year was the first time we could actually swim in it. It was completed at the end of our senior year. So I'm walking around campus in awe, first of all, this morning. So you guys are very lucky to be in a different space. There's a Wawa down the street. Never mind. Different space and time. So my journey to where I am now, I'm the Director of Admissions and Enrollment at a program called the Oliver Scholars Program. Much like PrEP, it is an access program that identifies, prepares, places and supports students of color, specifically Black and Latino students, places them in independent schools like St. Andrews. And my journey to Oliver started as a PrEP student. It actually started prior to that. I was born in Guyana in South America, and when I came to this country, I went into the 3rd grade, and you may not know, but the education system in the Caribbean is much like the British system. So I was literally 2 years ahead of my class, but I couldn't be placed or skipped because of my age. So I was in 3rd grade with 5th grade knowledge, and board, right? And so I got involved in everything else that I shouldn't be getting involved in except for academics, because I already knew the curriculum. And then this program came about, this program called Prep for Prep, and it actually required us to actually read and think more and do more math. And as much as I didn't, I was comfortable not doing much work because I was getting by, and I actually had to start challenging myself, and I realized now, back then not so much, but I actually enjoyed the challenge of learning, right? Actually learning and not just getting by. And so Prep for Prep happened. It was 14 months, and through Prep for Prep I learned about St. Andrews. And in coming to America and in being in public school, there are limits to public school education. So when I got to St. Andrews, I was in awe that there are fields, and there's like a building for sports, and there was this science center, and it wasn't just a classroom. And I fell in love with this space and the idea that students can be challenged, students could be, you can sort of not necessarily design your learning, but you can really learn as much as you want to. There are all these, there's photography, there's ceramics, there are all these other opportunities. And so my goal in life was to make sure that I tell as many people about it, about these kinds of schools, and I be in this space trying to get as many other students involved. And so I spent umpteen years at Prep for Prep in various positions. I worked in counseling, So I was a post-placement counselor for boarding school students and visited students in Massachusetts, at Andover, at Exeter, in Milton, some other schools in Massachusetts. Unfortunately, I didn't have the Southern territory because I would have loved to come back to St. Andrews during that time. But I just involved myself in the counseling aspect of students of color, specifically in independent schools, and realized that what I loved about the whole access space was the admissions piece. And so I worked in admissions at Prep for about 3 years, and then moved on to Oliver this year, 2 years ago, excuse me. And I just enjoy it. I love being able to go out and find students who are motivated, who have no idea that these schools exist, and debunk the thought that boarding school is for bad kids, and that, you'll be beaten or, punished at every turn. And really expose as many families and motivated students to these opportunities. So it's a little bit about what got me here. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Anna Hickman. I graduated from St. Andrews in 2002, so I was just back on campus for my 15-year reunion, which was very exciting. I'm originally from Chestertown, Maryland, so just down the road, and I know a lot of people in this room because the Hickmans have been here like forever, feels like. My dad was class of 74, my uncle was class of 76, my brother was class of 2000, got a 02, got a 07, 05, there was a lot of us, but St. Andrews has been instrumental in my journey to where I am. I am currently a principal at a public charter school in Washington, D.C., and I've been in my 12th year in education. I was a teacher for 9 years and moved into leadership in the past 3. And when I think about how I got there, I lead summer training and weekly training for my teachers every week. And at the start of training, we always talk about how we got to this work. And so for my 22-year-old teachers who are in Teach for America or have never been in education, theirs looks different than my veteran teachers who come in and say, here's how I got here. And so I also tell them my story. And when I tell them my story, it often starts with the farm I grew up on and St. Andrews. And St. Andrews has just been really instrumental in sort of how I developed both as a leader and just a critical thinker, and really pushed me to think about the world. After St. Andrews, I went to Davidson College, and then the second piece of my journey that was really instrumental was that I moved to Honduras and taught first grade for my first teaching experience with an organization called Becca. For those of you who know Kervin and the work that Becca does, Kervin was a student when I was there, so that ages me, but yes. I was down there at that time, and Becca really transformed how I started to really think about education and what the possibilities with education were. So after returning from Honduras, I moved to DC and started teaching, and I realized after teaching first grade and after teaching kindergarten that I wasn't getting the students early enough. And I know you're thinking, like, aren't first graders 6? They are. I wanted to get there earlier. Early childhood is where it needs to start, and I am a fierce advocate for that. And so for those of you who will be my session leader, TBD, more to come. I am incredibly passionate about making sure our 3- and 4-year-olds in this country, particularly in public education, have the access to high quality experiences. And that's what I've been doing in Washington, D.C. For the past 10 years. In my work right now, I'm at a founding school. So we started in 2013 in Ward 8, and our mission is really to create a high quality school for students who need it the most. The gap between students that are being served in high quality seats in Ward 8 is tremendous. And so our mission is really to make sure that we're serving those students and they're getting the education they deserve, not just unlike the unfortunate public schools down the street that are not serving students, that are failing students regularly. We're trying to make sure they get those opportunities. There's a lot of things when I think about what challenges me and what inspires me in this work. In my 4th year of teaching, I had a student named King, and he came from a lot of trauma, and he had a really tough life at home. And King was pretty verbally and physically aggressive. And when I say verbally aggressive, I'm a 3-year-old, I'm not gonna like say in front of Mr. Roach what he was saying, but he was just really angry at the world. And every day I told King that I cared about him, because he needed someone to tell him that. And every day I said, I care about you, after he threw his shoe at me or a student. And I said, King, I love you and I'm glad you're here. And I told him this over and over again, partially for me and partially for King. And I just wanted him to hear that. And King, I would love to tell you that it transformed his year and that he was somehow a different student at the end of the year. And he was a little. We were on the upswing. But the thing that happened that really just pushed me to remember how important my job is as a teacher is that I had a parent come in and tell me, Miss Hickman, my daughter told me something about King, and I was like, oh no. I was really worried. I was like, he did something and I didn't see it, I didn't catch it. And she said, she came home and told me, Mommy, King makes really poor choices and he always hits his friends, but Miss Hickman really cares about him. And I realized in that moment that not only was King hearing it, but my words were so impactful for every student in that room. And as I think about what's so hard about teaching and what's so hard about leading is that, particularly for our youngest students, everything that comes out of your mouth, they hold on to, they're sponges. And so to hear yourself back in a 3-year-old is both exciting and terrifying, because I see myself when they get books out and they pretend to be the teacher, and I'm like, oh boy, that's what I do every day, right? And so just seeing that in students, it inspires me and pushes me to do this work. Teaching and leading in Ward 8 is hard, and I tell my teachers that every day. I tell them, this work is hard, this work is important, and you can do this work. And I think about that every day because our students deserve good teachers, they deserve good leaders, they deserve people who are gonna fight for them every single day. And that's what I try to do every day, even though I'm tired and needed my cup of coffee, even this morning after what was a long week at school. And so when I look back on how I got here, so much of it was the support I got here at St. Andrews. So much of it was meeting the incredible families and teachers along the way. It was having inspiring teachers and leaders that told me that I could do it, so that when I get in front of a group of students or a bunch of new teachers, I tell them, you too can do this work, because the world needs you to.
Hi, I'm Joy McGrath. I graduated from here in 1992, and I also worked here from 1999 to 2007. So I've been really fortunate to spend a lot of time at St. Andrews, and I just want to say how honored I am to be on this panel with all these remarkable women. Thank you all for being here. I'm learning so much already, so it's quite a privilege. On the way in here, Elizabeth told me, well, you can talk about, the influence that St. Andrews had on your path in education if that's relevant. And I said, it's entirely relevant. It's the entire story. I came to St. Andrews as a fifth former and grew up in Smyrna, Delaware, about 10 minutes from here. It was the first, the Smyrna Wendy's was the first Wendy's of the first Frosty Run, which was nice. And I think it was the only Wendy's because Tammy referred to this, that there just wasn't very much else really within a 100-mile radius, actually. And I'm a local, so I can really attest to that. That was true. So you may have been to Smyrna for that reason. So I got here through a bizarre series of events that involved my orthodontist, whose son was enrolled here, threatening to not take my braces off unless I looked at the school. And I was admitted in like July of the summer before my fifth form year. And St. Andrews changed my life. I had been in the public schools in Smyrna, which were fine. They had put me on what they called then the secretarial track. So I was taking shorthand and typing and was not destined for college technically in that track. But on the other hand, I can type 110 words a minute, which comes in very handy. Every day, I learned on an actual typewriter, so the students can go and Google typewriter after this, and you can find out what that is. When I got here, I met so many incredible teachers and also so many incredible students and counterparts. And I had actually never written an essay for school before I got here or done anything like that. And so it was just completely transformational for me. I read tons and tons of books, but didn't quite know what I was doing with them. And I met some incredible role models. My advisor was Nan Mean, who's just an incredible person and was an incredible influence. And I think, when I think about those early influences and
my career in education, I guess what I realize now is that the reason I've been working in education all along is because education, to me, is really about the future. It's about paying it forward. Working in education, it's about progress, it's about getting better, it's about improvement. I think that's one of the reasons why actually athletics is an important part of education, because that's what sports are about too. And that's something I've always wanted to be a part of, and it's something that inspires me to get up and go to work every day. So today I work at Yale University, and I'm the chief of staff to the president of the university, which doesn't really mean anything to anyone. No one when they're a little kid looks at their parents and says, "Mommy and Daddy, I want to be the chief of staff of a president of an Ivy League university when I grow up." But that's what I do, and you know, every day I'm really sensible of the privilege that's attached to that. Every day, you know, I get up and do this job that has this incredible scope, and I believe has a lot of impact. I think, you know, universities are really, really important in the way that I think high schools are really important. You know, what Anna does is very important at all the levels of education that we're all working really matter. And I think one of the most important things for me has been in my jobs, I've been able to work both here at St. Andrews, working for Tad Roach, and at Yale, working for the president, Peter Salovey. I've been really lucky to work for people who have just tremendous values, tremendous dedication, great vision for what education can be, what students can be, who look at students every day and see potential and possibility. And I think that's been another really important factor in my career. When I was here on the faculty, I was given a lot of opportunities to do really interesting things. So I got to be in the classroom as an English teacher. I lived on Schmalzi for 6 years. Who lives in Schmalzi now? Raise your hand. That's awesome. This warms my heart. Are your rooms clean? When I look back on my career in education, actually living in Schmalzi was probably the greatest. That was probably the high point. I feel like it's really up and downhill from then, but and I was doing fundraising as well. I was hired to do fundraising. I guess I should say that. So I was in the development office, and I think and that's also been a place where I've been really comfortable. My work today for the president, I spend about a third of my time on fundraising, and you know, this work takes resources. It takes resources, it takes financial support. It's not inexpensive to educate students properly, to do research that's going to have an impact on people's lives and create new knowledge. And so that's been really important and a privilege as well, to be able to communicate to people who are in a position to make a difference how important this is and how their contributions can actually be life-changing and can be world-changing, and that's been a large part of what I've done in my career as well. So that's sort of my summary, and I think for all of us who work in schools and universities, it's a tremendous privilege to be part of the future and be part about what, you know, how things, you know, the improvement and progress that we're all going to make as human beings and as society. So.
Hi everyone. My name is Giselle Farlong, and I'm a graduate of the class of 2003. Branches, Jen Wilson, I see you up there. I think I had a really sort of non-linear path in education. And that sort of started here. I was a really reluctant St. Andrean. For those faculty members who were here, you may remember that about me. And I'm happy to go into more detail about what exactly that meant. But really it meant that I was a new sophomore and I didn't want to be here. And as these students all know, this is a hard life. You know, it's a good life, but it's hard. And by the time I graduated, you know, we'll all attest to the kinds of personal connections that we made with faculty, with other students, but I think that is mostly what shaped my experience. And you know, this is my 4th year back as a faculty member now. I teach Latin, Ancient Greek, chair the Classical Languages Department, and work in the Diversity Education Program. But without those personal connections, I never would have come back. I never would have, I think, been in education to begin with. So after college, I had no practical skills. My training is in classical languages, which yes, thank you, which I loved and developed a passion for here, certainly, classical languages and literature, but I majored in classical languages in college and anthropology and American history. And after that, the next step was graduate school. I didn't know what else to do because all I knew how to do was write papers and think thoughts. And had no real practical application. So I wanted to be a professional thought thinker and essay writer and lover of old things. And so I started a PhD program in classics, but I didn't, the joy that I found was actually in tutoring Latin to middle school students and high school students in the Los Angeles area. And that's what I looked forward to most, not really my survey courses or anything like that. So I moved to Prague and decided I wanted to teach and taught English, and I moved back to Philadelphia and worked in day schools and then worked at a boarding school up north and back to graduate school because I still, like to be a professional thought thinker. And when you like that sort of thing, you go to school for as long as you can. But I think for me, what's most guided my career, at least up to this point, is that curiosity and that desire for a personal connection and a willingness to embrace a really non-linear path. I mean, if you told my 18-year-old self on graduation day that I would be back working at St. Andrews, I would have laughed in your face most directly for an extended period of time. This is not, I think, necessarily, we have a lot of alumni who work on the faculty, and I don't know that anyone graduates and thinks, this is my life, this is exactly what I want to do. Or if you do, I would encourage you to think, let me live and do some other things, and then come back to St. Andrews, because St. Andrews is a place that is always ready to welcome you back. It's part of that personal connection that means you always have a home here. Whether the journey is linear or easy or tough. And for me, in my story as a St. Andrews student, it certainly wasn't easy all the time. I certainly didn't always feel like I belonged. But for me, it's education where I've actually found a home. And I certainly, had those foundations here at St. Andrews.
Hi everyone, my name is Catherine Orphis, a proud graduate of the class of 2007 with a couple of familiar faces in the room. And I'm really excited to be here with you all today and be back at campus. I'll actually pick up right where Giselle left off, which is to say that I'm the St. Andrean who left and thought that is exactly where I want to be and exactly where I want to spend the rest of my life and career. I grew up in New York and I had gone to really great schools my whole life, but none that sort of pushed me to think about the world and its challenges and our place in the world. And I really credit Mr. Roach and my other teachers here with establishing a whole new worldview that Manhattan never gave me. And so I left St. Andrews sort of thinking, my teachers here are the greatest people in the world, and I think they live happy and meaningful lives, and therefore, that's exactly what I want to do. Fast forward a couple of years, I studied English, psychology, a little bit of education in college, and ended up joining Teach for America, but thinking that I'd end up right back at a school like St. Andrews within 2 to 3 years when that commitment was over. And in some ways, lucky for me, I ended up at a school, part of a network of public charter schools called Uncommon Schools in Newark, New Jersey, actually alongside a classmate, Hadley Roach, that I just flipped for. I've been there for 7 years, and it's a school about college access for students and communities that don't have that available to them, but it's also an organization that is about sort of creating and growing and evolving public education and figuring out what works and how we can get that out to more schools that need it. And I find that I'm really fired up by that part of the work, how we can sort of scale these best practices, why it's okay that there are people in the country who say, we don't know what to do with public education, when I think there are a ton of data points out there, whether it's teachers or schools or networks or districts that are doing great work. And I don't think it's fair that we can just say this problem is too big, or we don't know how to solve it. I think there's a lot of evidence that we do, and I want to continue to work with organizations and groups of people that want to get that word out there and help right the sinking ship that is public education in a lot of places in this country.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hadley Roach, and it's great to be back up here after my brief appearance last night. So as Catherine spoke to, I'm currently also working at an uncommon school in Newark, New Jersey. It's part of the North Star Network. And I am the Dean of Curriculum and Instruction there now, and I teach 7th and 8th grade English. But to back up a little bit and think about how I arrived in my current position and doing the work that I'm doing, I actually hear a lot of echoes of my story throughout the panel, but there are some obvious differences. So the first is that I think, unlike Catherine, I tried really hard to avoid the fate of becoming an English teacher. And I really struggled with that, especially after I left college. And I tried to do some other stuff. So at a particularly low point, I worked in a basement call center triaging pediatric health emergencies. I did some writing. I was trying to find a community, find a place that kind of made me tick as a professional. And to be honest, the idea of teaching both didn't occur to me very often, and when it did, I kind of immediately pushed it away. But I had some really strong conversations with teachers and mentors who I've known and been lucky to have in my life, who kind of pushed me in the direction of teaching, not because schools are great and because teaching is great and a good thing to do, but because teaching is an exciting profession to be a part of. It's a profession that involves creativity and performance and human connection and really meaningful work with other people, both adults and kids. And so after hearing from a lot of great teachers and kind of learning about teaching not as a group of teachers, not as a group of people who have taught me and influenced me, but as a group of professionals, I started to think really hard about how I wanted to enter my own career as a teacher. And so I started teaching abroad, actually, in Jordan, at King's Academy, where John Austin and Monica Matuk, two beloved former teachers at St. Andrews, are currently running things. And then I quickly moved back to the US to work at Uncommon Schools, where I started to develop a lot more as a teacher and as someone who thinks, as Catherine was saying, about how we can develop great teachers and how we can work with students from many, many different backgrounds in this country to develop the kinds of learning environments that St. Andrews is one example of, but I'm really excited about thinking more broadly about how different kinds of schools can become inspirational places of creativity and learning. And so that's where I am now.
Good morning. My name is Grace Gahagan. I graduated in 2010, and I'm incredibly conscious of my age among these amazing educators. So I'm a little closer to my St. Andrews experience, and hearing, and similarly, I think I'm hearing a lot of echoes in these women's experience as well. But again, similar to Hadley, I feel like I take issue, or I struggled to, oh gosh, here we go. So at St. Andrews, I was involved in everything. I was an athlete, I was an art major, I was president of orchestra, I did community service. Like, I just loved this space because it allowed me to do everything that I loved, that my identity was fulfilled here, except I think at the beginning in English class. English was so hard. Reading Shakespeare my freshman year was like gibberish. And the way that I got through that was the connections with teachers. That I had so many lifelines and people who cared about me as a full person, that I grew in being able to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. That in academics I was struggling really hard. My teachers asked questions in paragraphs and I had no idea what the answers were. And it was really big for me to learn how to feel strong in not knowing. So leaving St. Andrews with these values and this sense of self and ethos, right? I went to Colorado College and I was on the lacrosse team my freshman year, and quickly learned that took over my full identity, and that was not something that I was comfortable with. I found myself surrounded with people and in spaces that we weren't having those meaningful conversations about about human connection, about why we're all here, and it was really limiting for me. So I think my transition in college was much more who am I surrounding myself with? And going abroad, I studied abroad in Italy because I was an art history major, and that's the birthplace of art, as they tell us. And it was the first time that I was outside of American culture and aware of that 6 months in another country, I was learning. It was the Italian culture was a mirror that I was able to hold up to myself, to my values, and to the structure that was around me in American culture. So I was learning through experience and reflection, and I totally got hooked. So my first year out of college, I went to Cameroon to teach art history, which I thought I loved, and I was going to be sharing my subject with young people, and I was so excited. And also teaching PE because athletics was still part of my passion. And my first year teaching in Cameroon, I killed my subject. It was terrible, hated art history, didn't want to talk about art. Because I was limited in my ability to convey the passion. I was showing slides and reading index cards, and I was like, this just wasn't what I experienced at St. Andrews. This was not what I was excited about. And I wasn't fostering the types of conversations with my students that I knew to be true and authentic and really important for the future. So then I left and went to India, and similarly, I felt like I didn't have the mentorship at that school that I knew that I needed to grow as a teacher. So I went to the American International School of Chennai after that, and was in an environment where the whole child was cared for, that in a diverse community where we had multinational groups coming together, that teachers, my principal made us read a book on Confucianism to make sure that the Korean population understood and knew how to function in this American classroom that we were providing. So it was this really close study of the cultures in our classrooms, the skills that we were teaching and asking our students to develop in our classroom. And then this also the school had to focus on the mission of the school, the values that we were espousing and valuing. So I'm a young teacher. I have only 3 years of experience, and now, and through those 3 years, I learned what I didn't know, and I traveled a lot. I did a lot of reflecting on the social structures that produced me. And now I'm in graduate school, in academia, and learning the language and the lenses to sort of frame and understand the experiences that I had. And I think my vision in education right now is learning how to build bridges across intersectionality. So of all the different identities, even in this room, we talk about human connection, but the actual like the moments where we are able to transcend our differences and really understand the other and understand the other perspectives, that's what I believe is the vision for the future and how we're going to make this world better. So I'm still in the learning process. I'm still figuring it out. Yeah, thanks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Frances Ramirez. I graduated from here in 2003, like Giselle. Very excited to be here, and it's just wonderful to see all of these wonderful faces, and just really, I'm feeling kind of emotional being here, just being back on campus. I told my mother this morning that I was, going to be here, and she said, she just thinks so fondly of St. Andrews, and she says, tell Mr. Roach and Mrs. Roach that I say hello, and she was just beyond excited that I'd be here. So again, I graduated in 2003. I was am a first generation Colombian American from Queens, New York. Any New Yorkers here in the house? Okay, nice. But before coming to St. Andrews, I graduated from Prep for Prep, where Miss Nicole Smith over there hazed me almost with our very grueling and intensive Prep for Prep education, which I think I talk about Prep for Prep, once a day, if not once a week, in my everyday. It's just something that I carry very, very much with me in my everyday life. It prepared me to be able to be here at St. Andrews and to be able to graduate and go on to University of Pennsylvania, where I graduated in 2007. I studied political science with a concentration in international relations, and I did not pursue political science, and actually have never been an educator, unlike most of these women on the panel, but I did actually go on to work at Uncommon Schools, along with Hadley and some other folks in the room I know as well, but not as an educator, but rather as an HR practitioner, so in human resources, which is something that because I was able to get an internship through Prep for Prep when I was in high school, in HR at an investment bank down on Wall Street. So I've basically been in HR ever since, and was able to pursue and combine my passion for education, particularly the mission that Uncommon Schools has of the fact that everyone should have access to college, to have access to a quality education. It's just something that's such a huge part of me. So I was able to combine my experience in financial services, human resources, with my passion for education. And so I was able to combine that, and now I've actually since left Uncommon Schools, and now I work for a very large corporation in Philadelphia, but also doing human resources. And so very, very, varied path, but I think through everything, what I've learned in particular, being a first-generation American, child of a single mother, immigrant, is really one about opportunity. Being here at St. Andrews, I don't take it for granted. I think I probably took it for granted while I was here at times, because it was so difficult. And some days I just was like, man, this is really hard. But it's all worth it. It really, truly is. And it, now that I'm a professional in corporate America, I think I look back and it's given me the confidence to know that I belong where I'm at, that I'm able to be at a table with other professionals that don't necessarily look like me, and that I have the confidence that I know that I have just as probably a better education than a lot of them in the room, and that I'm able to bring strong ideas, good ideas, diverse ideas, and that's just really important. And I think here at St. Andrews, it's just such an environment where we promote that diversity in thought, and that's just so important. As an HR practitioner, I work day in and day out with numbers. We look at spreadsheets with thousands and thousands of rows of information, where we're looking primarily at gender diversity, ethnic diversity, because it's just such an important part of business. It's actually lucrative to be a diverse organization, and it's just important. It's just the right thing. So all that to say, I'm really excited to be here along with such a wonderful group of people. And that's part of my journey in education. So.
Thank you all so much. I thought I'd start the questions by asking you how your gender has informed your journey in education. Not all of you have to answer, but anybody who would like to start and anyone who wants to join in, and then we'll get questions from all the students here as well.
Hadley and I actually talked a little bit about this as we were preparing for today. And one thing that we said that's really surprised us about being a female in the teaching profession is that you often sort of think about teachers, or society at large thinks about teachers as sort of these like nurturing, soft, loving, caring, sort of like second mothers to their students. And I think that's true in a lot of ways, and teachers show that care and love in different ways, but we both said we've been struck by sort of how powerful women in education can be, and some of the women that we've worked for who, you know, as a teacher or a leader, you have to be commanding and powerful and directive and prepared, and so it's sort of entering this profession has sort of redefined my understanding of what it means to be like a female leader or a female professional in a way that I wouldn't have maybe imagined the teaching profession would do.
Yeah, and just to add to what Catherine really eloquently said, we talked about how the experience of being in front of a classroom and feeling that the work that you're doing as a teacher has a direct impact on the lives of those kids in your room, however many they are, whoever they are. The fact that you're kind of setting the temperature of the room, dictating the quality of the conversation, pushing the thinking, that's a really important place to be, and somewhere you are every day if you're a teacher, right? So when you teach, the thing that you do today is not over. There's a next day, and the next week, the next month, the next year. And so you're in charge of that room for as long as you're in it. And I think as women, we talked about how that's really empowering and pretty remarkable if you think about teaching as an act of, I don't know what the right word is. Like, I said empowerment, and that's true, but yeah. Anyone want to fill that in?
I can jump in and talk a little bit about just my experience with gender in education and just in general, I think. Just this past week, I was watching the New York City Marathon, and this woman, Catherine Switzer, came on, and she was the first woman to run the Boston Marathon back in 1969, maybe 70, and she wasn't allowed to run in the race, and the race official came after her and tried to literally tear off her her race number, because she wasn't supposed to be there. She was a woman, and it was really powerful to hear her talk about her journey and just to follow her. I had the privilege of hearing her speak at a conference about a month ago in New York for the Women in Cable and Telecommunication Conference, and she spoke a lot about what it means to be a woman just in life, and how there were a lot of things that were not available to women, like running in a marathon or education, and her words have really stuck with me. She has talked about how we really have to just empower one another, and just be who you are, be comfortable in your own skin. I think actually athletics play a big part in that. Like, you're able to be healthy, and I think I didn't realize that until after St. Andrews. I hated going to sports, but but it makes you healthy. But that's just one example of how I see, gender is really, it's a powerful divider, but it's also something that can really bring us together if we look at it in a positive way, and in empowering one another.
Yeah, I think about this a lot. The statistics in schools are that, particularly in the public school system, majority of teachers are women and a majority of leaders are men, which is a really interesting statistic because what's happening to all these women teachers? We're not becoming leaders. And so I'm confronted with this daily, and think of my role. I've been in a number of leadership fellowships. I'm currently in one now, and a few years ago I was in one, and there was a number of leaders, and I was the only female in the room. And then now I'm a part of Relay's National Principal Fellowship, which is this incredible opportunity, and it's about 50-50. And so I think about how exciting it is in just the past few years that women who are leaders in the classroom and were teacher leaders are actually being able to be leaders in schools, because the best leaders in schools were the best people that were in classrooms, in my opinion. And so I just think about the walls that are slowly starting to be broken down for women, but that there's a lot of great women that are being led by people that don't have the same expertise of them because of sort of their gender and their experience. And I think we still have room to grow, but in my school right now, more of the leadership team is female than men. And I think it's really exciting, and that's because of their expertise and their experience. And so it's something we're really proud of as we really think about growing strong women leaders in schools.
Hi, I'm Cindy Lay, and a lot of us have come from great public school backgrounds, and I was wondering, for those of you who work at public schools, how do you still educate in a way that's meaningful with standardized testing, or the big state standardized test at the end of the year, and still find a way to give students a passion for the subject rather than teaching to the test?
Go ahead, speaking. Okay, sorry. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm a bilingual school counselor at a public school in New York City and Brooklyn, and my strong main emphasis is on school culture at our school, in terms of embedding traditions, a support system, as well as providing the why for students as to why they come to school. I found that through my experience here at St. Andrews, the advising program was extremely instrumental for me. Although I had 3 different advisors, Andrew Salvo, Mr. Salvo's oldest son, being one of my great advisors, I found that mentorship, that ability to have somebody that can just advocate for you and just make school fun, and just be able to just kind of vent to and have, at least be able to come to school and know that there's one person there that is just interested and knows about what you possibly have done that weekend. So I found that a lot of our teachers at our school we're actually a priority school, so that means that we're one of the 15 or 5% lower performing schools in New York City, and I feel that we're in a building. Unfortunately, it's considered like a failing district, so we're the 3rd school to come in the last 10 years, and the hope is that I really feel that with this advisory component that I think is different from what previous schools may have had in that building. I think that the students, our attendance rate is higher than our neighboring schools, and I find that potentially this advising program or this mentorship could be something that kind of pushes kids as well as teachers to kind of think outside of, it's not just about the test scores. Like, you come to school and you want to know about the stories of your students and you want to feel more invested, and I feel that as a result it might potentially also be helping teachers to what might motivate them in the morning, aside from just, they might be being tested in the class or having an informal observation or a formal observation. It's like, yeah, but my advisors are there today and we're meeting today first period, and we name our advisories after our alma mater. And so it's like, you know, my Blue Jays, my kids today are coming in, going to be there for me first period, and that could be that motivation that kind of supports those teachers as well as students. And so it's creating that culture just for all. And I know that test scores are a huge, huge component. They claim that, you know, it's not necessarily all that we're being tested as a school, but when we got labeled as a priority school 2 years ago, it was because of our test scores. And so it's something that, you know, specifically as my role as a bilingual school counselor is creating that culture in that school.
I would love to tell you that we have a great answer for that, but we don't. It's high stakes. Like, I get money for my school based on how we do on our tests, so they're pretty important. And ultimately, those test scores are the ones that are deciding if jail cells are being built or not, and so if third graders are passing. And so, are they important? Yes. Are they the only thing that's important? No. I think about the biggest thing that shifts that dynamic in a school, and it's the people in front of kids. And so my best teachers are the ones that can say, I know how to teach the standard and I know how to get you excited about learning at the same time. And the teachers that are only doing the test scores, you feel that in their culture and in what's happening in classrooms. And so I think a lot of it comes down to teacher development and making sure like the resources and the priorities and the mission of the school are saying these numbers are important because we hope that these assessments are aligned to what's important for learning. But even if they're not, what is this other intangible, and do teachers know how to teach that?
I also think the focus on standardized testing, right, is one that has to be balanced all the time. But I also see a lot of promise in some of the movements we've made in standardized testing. And so I think, like I can speak for my state, New Jersey, we have a new Common Core assessment. And I believe in the majority of the work that I think the students have to do to be successful on those tests. I think it requires good thinking, good writing, good organization. And I do see those as valuable skills. And so I think to everyone's point here is if you can teach that in a way that invests students and pull out the bits that you do really want your kids to walk away with, because there are bits that are valuable, then you can have a successful classroom that is also preparing students for success on these assessments.
Hi, my name is Diana, and first off, thank you so much for all the work that you guys do to make education more accessible and equal for students. And my question is, do you think that in general in this country, that's something that's actually happening and education is becoming more accessible, or for all the good work that people do, there's still a lot more to be done, or there's more negative work happening?
So I would say, so I work in admissions and I get to go around New York City to all different public schools and sort of look for highly motivated students. And I've done this for a number of years, who's counting. But what I've found is that in the past 5 years, there are many more students who are eligible for programs like Oliver and Prep. And so what that tells me is that, you know, not only education is becoming more accessible, but the kind and the quality of education and what students are learning and retaining is definitely getting better. You know, I would say in comparison to the last 10, 15 years. So I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but I do see it being more accessible to more people, especially with the charter school movement, bringing more schools to neighborhoods and more quality schools to neighborhoods. I'll leave it at that, because, you know, there's a lot of controversy within the charter school world as well. But I do see it as, I do see them as bringing more quality education to neighborhoods and to areas that did not have it in the past.
I think some of it also has to do with just having access to the knowledge. And I think as programs and as schools like St. Andrews create more diverse leaders, those individuals are then in turn going out and reaching more people and allowing people to learn about the opportunities out there. Also, similar to my story, many of the individuals who are alums of our program, the number one career choice is in education because they want to allow other people to have similar opportunities. Of course, then there's also banking and finance and all that, but, and that's important too, but it's very important for those individuals to say, I see what I had access to, and I see the inequalities, and what am I going to do with the opportunities that were afforded to me? And with those opportunities, if you go out and you're able to expose others to them, we've had individuals open schools, open charter schools, and try to emulate their particular experiences at their respective schools. I think it's not across the board. Of course, we know that there are many people who don't have access even at this point in 2017, and there are people in rural areas as well, not only in the city, as quite often people tend to think, but a little bit at a time we start to see kind of growth and people having a little more access.
Yeah, I have to say from the point of view of higher education, obviously this is a huge issue. It's the most important issue when we're thinking about the education part of the mission of the research university. And that pipeline development work that a lot of you all are doing is so incredibly important because I think there are so many students who don't believe that they have access to an education at a place like Yale or a place like Harvard where I went to college. And that's a combination of factors. There's sticker shock about the price for a lot of middle class families, for a lot of families where there's not great preparation. They don't realize that there are ways. We have preparation programs and development programs for incoming freshmen. You know, at a place like Yale and our peers, we all pick the median income in the US for a family of four. Right now that's $65,000. So if you're at the median income of $65,000 or less in your family, you come to Yale for free with no loans. That's true for Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, all of our peers. We have the same policy, but people don't know that. So we have that kind of communication issue. And then there's just seats. And I think part of the question of accessibility to education is accessibility to what kind of education, right? And so, unfortunately, a lot of people from low-income backgrounds or who might be first-generation college goers are actually spending a lot of resources on places that don't have great financial aid policies, trying to attain an education that's not really going to help them. Or essentially, there are plenty of places making money off of low-income first-time college goers or people who are getting some other kind of accreditation, and that's a profit center, and they're not necessarily walking away with any skills that are going to help them get ahead in life, and that's a really big issue as well. And then I think, you know, for certainly in my job, you know, America is this place where we just have incredible and increasing inequality. And we're also a global research institution, and so we have, you know, accessibility kind of on the international stage, and what's that about? And you know, so when we look at our financial aid in the college, for example, our financial aid to our international students, about 10% of our undergraduate body, their average grant is actually much higher than our domestic. So we're looking, and that's actually hard work to find international students who are coming at this requiring assistance from more disadvantaged backgrounds. It's actually quite easy to find international students who are affluent. And so there are a lot of challenges, but I think, you know, we've seen, and I think what Nicole said actually speaks to this, we've seen slow progress because I think of individuals, right? The process of education itself is a process of opening. And so people who are educators and people who believe in education come quite naturally to this issue of accessibility. You always want to reach those students who are going to make the most of their education or the most potential. It doesn't really matter what their background is. And I think so that's something that naturally happens. So as more people from more backgrounds become educators, so we've seen tremendous changes, both with women coming to colleges and universities, the situation we have today where at a place like Yale, 17% of our students are receiving Pell Grant assistance, and that's a big increase from, even when I was in college. I qualified for Pell Grants. I received Pell scholarships when I was in college, and that was a much smaller number. At Harvard then, it was probably 5% or something. So progress is slow. It's really slow, and I don't know if it'll continue to be slow or if there's going to be a revolution. But it's certainly something that's, I think, on everyone's mind.
I mean, and to Joy's point, educational access can't be just about individual achievement or personal connection. It has to be about systems, and it has to be about systemic change. And that is a narrative that I think everyone who's involved in the field of education in this profession, I always believe that. And I think it's important to embrace that systemic change, and I think that's what, the work in Common certainly is working to do. This job, whether you are in the classroom or not, it is a political act right now. It's a radical act. And I think until we really embrace what that means fully for every child, educational access won't necessarily be about the systemic change that it needs to be.
To Giselle's point that teaching is a radical act, I think another way of answering your question, which is a really excellent one, is in thinking about how are we conceiving of teacher development. And I think for a long time in this country, there's been a pervasive myth that teachers spring fully formed into the classroom as either inspirational people or as people who shouldn't be in front of children. And those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum, and that's what you got, one or the other. And so I think one really interesting movement that's happening right now in schools around the country, public, private, charter, is in trying to conceive of teachers as people who learn things and get better at things, which sounds so obvious, but because of the myth of teachers who either have it or don't, we haven't spent or invested the time to develop teachers. And so if teaching is a career that in any way interests or excites you, I encourage you also to think of it as a career with a learning curve, and one that you can get better at and that changes year to year, because there's some really exciting work being done in building and developing better teachers, and taking teachers who may be recent college graduates or who've been teaching for a really long time and giving them the tools to get better at their craft.
We're running out of time, but does anybody have another question? Last question.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. As someone who grew up in a place that has sort of an increasing disparity between the public school system and the independent school system, how do you think as educators from backgrounds of both, we balance in this country the idea of private education and public education and giving accessibility to all students?
So I've been thinking about that question in a big way since I'm at Teachers College right now, studying to be a public urban school teacher. And with the background of St. Andrews, I still question, am I going public or private? And what I've heard mentioned here today as well is, I think the way that I'm answering that question is that it's not, I think there are so many schools today. I think there are private schools who are perpetuating the hierarchy in our society and are not. They say that they're doing the work, but they're not really doing the work. And I think there are public schools who are also really successful at sort of creating humans that are ready to do that good work. So I as my understanding of public versus private is being complexified, I'm learning that it's where I'm looking next year is of what type of school I want to teach at is going to be much more aligned with what are the values, what are the mission, what's their mission, what is their practice, and what values and ideals are being upheld through how they're structuring their school.
I think that's part of the challenge, and that's why programs like the program that I work for exists. And unfortunately, it does not exist across the country, but it really is the gap between those two. We work with, between Prep for Prep and Prep 9, we work with students from over 100 different schools. And in working with those students, we see that there is the need quite often when we're preparing those students to go off to schools like this. They have all of the ability in the world. Of course, some of those students would not have the opportunity, but also it's just expanding them and challenging them to realize that there is another way, or that there are classrooms that may want to hear, and this is not to say that in public school classrooms that they don't want to hear what individuals are saying, but there are different types of public schools where some don't necessarily teach in the same type of format that a St. Andrews does. I think of my first semester here where I was sitting there waiting to raise my hand, and there's all this intellectual discourse, and I'm like, and realizing, oh, you really want to hear what I have to say, and I just have to jump in there. And it's getting students used to that, to being part of the conversation and really supporting your ideas and to be critical thinkers. And sometimes, whether it's because of testing or different standards or things like that, some of those things may get lost. So that's what we try to work on when we're preparing our students in our preparatory component. But it's a challenge.
I also think it's easy for schools to tear each other down. Like, that's the easy work, is to kind of nitpick what's not going well at another institution, and say, you know, I don't like this isn't good for kids, this isn't good for teachers. But I think that the hope is that in improving one school, you can improve a system. So what's good for one group of kids can be good for another group of kids. And there are opportunities, I think, unfortunately, that often aren't taken, but there's some more of this work being done, which is exciting for schools to work together and kind of bridge differences. So at Uncommon right now, there are a lot of programs being done with charter schools and public schools collaborating on professional development and student development. So thinking about, like, what is the best way to teach reading to all kids in Newark, regardless of where they go to school. And so I think the exciting work that's ahead is in trying to get different kinds of schools to be part of the same conversation that's positive and productive, rather than involved in widening the differences and emphasizing those differences.
I think that's really interesting, Hadley, and I would say in higher ed, we're experiencing a similar kind of moment. So research universities that are private, like Yale, work in consortium with public research universities, and probably the main way that we work together is an organization called the American Association of Universities, which is really the 60 top research universities. So this is on the research side of the university, so not the education part, but expanding the boundaries of what we know about ourselves and about the world and scientific research and the discovery of new knowledge. And this is a really, the American public universities have been the hotbed of innovation and scientific discovery in this country for 150 years, probably since the passage of the Morrill Acts. I know Lori Unruh was here somewhere from my class, and the work of state universities that are doing applied work, extension work, actually have decreased starvation in the world, have improved the health of mothers, have really done incredible research that has made basic necessities of life, but also medical advances available I think, there's some certain number of patents involved in your iPhone. It's like, there's like 500 patents involved in your iPhone. Like 3/4 of them came out of discoveries made in American public universities. And I think we have to have a serious conversation in this country about the value of education. You hear people talking about the cost of education all the time, but we need to talk about the value of it. And I think that's the question for public, the support of public education in this country is, as a people and as a nation and a society, do we value discovery? Do we value the encouragement and development of young people to make the next generation of discoveries? And that's a serious question that we need to have. And I think there's a lot of political theater around this issue, but if you look at the support of public universities in this country and the tax dollars that are going to them, it's deplorable what's happened. I mean, most public universities, if you look at their budget, you think of them as state universities, right? Like University of Michigan, Berkeley, these places that are vanguard flagship universities in this country are receiving 20% of their funding from tax dollars, and the rest they're having to figure out on their own. We're not valuing that work in our public discourse, in our public debate, and I think we've got to do something to change that, or we're going to find ourselves in an unhappy situation in a number of respects. So I think that's really an excellent question.
Thank you. Last night, Dr. O'Dwyer told us that what is most important and what is most meaningful in life cannot be measured. And I think today, the power of your stories and the work that you're doing really can't be measured. Thank you.